my name is Mary Medino. The conditions that I was struggling with before even going to PRM last year in 2025 were a variety of symptoms that I do know now were related to endometriosis. When I was younger, from the time I had my first period, they were extremely painful, extremely heavy bleeding. My cycles were very short when it first had started, and myself and my mom, we knew it wasn't normal because my sisters were not experiencing the same symptoms. However, we didn't know why it was happening. So I would just record my symptoms, track my periods. Additional symptoms that I had growing up that I now know were related to endometriosis was stomach issues. I had a lot of stomach sensitivities, especially to foods with lactose. I was later diagnosed with lactose intolerance when I was 18. Again, did not know that it was part of endometriosis, and post-surgery, I'm no longer lactose intolerant. Other symptoms that I've experienced were occasionally pain with intercourse. I would have bowel pains, both vaginal pain and anal pain, depending on what was happening during those bowel movements. A lot of fatigue. I was placed on birth control at 18 as well. We had pushed with the gynecologist due to how severe my period symptoms were. Was there anything that we could do to mitigate them? And I had been on the pill for over 10 years before coming off of it. And once I came off of the pill, all of my symptoms had come back from when I was in middle school, except they came back worse. Each cycle, it would get worse and worse. I had debilitating cramps, debilitating pain. I would be skipping several days of work a month or working from home just to manage the pain symptoms. So all in all, the length that I've been experiencing symptoms really since childhood with the food intolerances. However, since 11, I have been dealing with the period symptoms from the onset of when I got my period. And I am currently 36, so over 20 years of experiencing these pains and symptoms. There were 3 main symptoms that affected my daily life the most. The biggest one being my debilitating cramps and pain that came along with my period. Even though it was 1 week out of the month, it would become several days of missing things or taking off of work. A lot of times I wouldn't be able to work out because I didn't want to get off of the couch, so it hindered my physical well-being, where at least once a month I was not moving my body. And this occurred throughout middle school, high school. I would have times where I'd be missing events, not being able to go to sporting events or pushing through practices. And then as an adult, this stemmed into missing work days, especially off of birth control. The treatment for my cramps when I was 18 was to put me on the pill. We had gone to the gynecologist and had run out of ideas on exactly what was going on. And at the time, it had made sense to put me on birth control because that can help alleviate the symptoms. However, those symptoms, even though they were alleviated, they were not gone. I still had extremely heavy periods. I still had cramps, but it was much more managed. When I came off of the pill as an adult, that's when my symptoms became even more severe. I came off of the pill at 31 to actually freeze my eggs because I found out that I had low fertility results when I tested my fertility at 31. So all the years post coming off of the pill, each cycle would progressively get worse or heavier. I would have nausea, would not be able to do things for anywhere from 4 to 7 days, depending on how bad the pain was. An additional symptom that affected my daily life was my lactose intolerance. I would have to take a prescription. That's how bad it had gotten. Originally, my stomach would just hurt a little bit when I would eat dairy, and then it got to the point where I would have stabbing pains, bloating, gas, horrible bowel movements, being on the toilet for a long time in extreme pain. I was diagnosed at 18 with the lactose intolerance. Started as a self-diagnosis. I went to my parents and I'm like, this has to be due to the dairy. I can't find anything else. I was eliminating fruits from my diet. And I originally told to take the lactate pill over the counter, but as the years had gone on, my lactose intolerance had become worse and it became even more terrible once I came off of the pill as well. So these mitigations had helped, but they were not solving the actual problem. And on my worst days, my pain level would be up to an 8, 9, not wanting to get off of the couch, counting down the hours to take a painkiller, using heating, and it was just not fun monthly to have to go through that. I would say the third one was the fatigue. I never realized that I was going through the fatigue symptoms without speaking to my sisters. I always say they had fairy princess periods, very light, minimal pain, if at all, could do anything they wanted to, would do HIIT workouts during their periods, and it was a struggle for me to even just want to walk and be my workout while my period was happening. So a third of the month, I would not really be moving my body, and it was difficult to go through without knowing why. I was actually not referred to PRM by a doctor. I found them on my own. I had a few people before researching endometriosis explain to me that they thought that my signs and symptoms fell under an endometriosis diagnosis. One of them was a colleague of mine. She herself has been diagnosed with endometriosis. Her mother and her sister have also been diagnosed. So when we were talking about my symptoms and the pain I was going through, she highly recommended researching it, bringing it up to the gynecologist as an option of let's explore what is going on with your body. Another person was my boyfriend. He has been around other women, friends in high school who were diagnosed with endometriosis. Apologize, my cats are fighting in the background. So he had a big push for me to do some research, and also a fertility doctor that I followed on social media. She has a lot of great videos and guidances, and because I had frozen my eggs back at 31, I was just following her from that, and her videos with the signs and symptoms really resonated with. So I had spent about a year working with my gynecologist just to understand the symptoms I was having. A big one as I was experiencing it was a lot of spotting. I would bleed a lot during my cycles, and that happened after coming off of birth control. So we did an ultrasound and she did some blood work, but everything came back normal. So then the next year I brought up endometriosis and unfortunately was brushed off. The answer I got was, well, you don't want to go back on birth control, so I don't really know what else to help you with. However, my primary doctor who I saw for the lactose intolerance, he was very helpful and pushed for me to reach out to PRM because he said, I'm all about second and third opinions. If this is something that you believe is going on with your body, absolutely go get checked out and see what they have to say because they are pelvic pain specialists. So he was the final push where I was like, let me reach out. What's the worst that could happen? They tell me that that's not it. And I go another route of finding out what's going on with my body. So the reason I went through with the treatment plan was because I had a very quick experience. I saw the pelvic pain specialist first, and she was fairly confident it was endometriosis. She was fairly confident that I was a candidate for the excision surgery and recommended seeing the surgeon. So I saw her on a Monday. I got an appointment with Dr. Tushan, my surgeon, on the Tuesday, and same thing, very confident, believed it was endometriosis, believed I was a very good confident for surgery. And at that point, I was like, what? If this is going to help, I am all for going the next step and going to schedule a surgery. And by Wednesday, I had a surgery date 2 weeks later to have my excision surgery. So everything moved really quickly. However, it was the best thing that I have done. I did not actually go through any prehab before my surgery, only because everything was scheduled so quickly. I was going to look at a prehab injection series, but because both the nurse and Dr. Tushan were very confident that excision surgery was the right next step, I decided that I would much rather go into the surgery without prehab, address the symptoms, and then proceed to post-hab. The surgery that I had was the excision surgery, where they fully removed the lesions out of my body. My recovery the first few weeks wasn't terrible. I honestly expected to feel much worse. I don't know if it's because the pain I was experiencing pre-surgery was so much more extreme than I had even realized that the pain of recovery after the surgery was really not as bad as I had expected. It was a little difficult not really doing anything for a week or 2 weeks. I was used to getting up, going around, going to a bunch of different places, going into work. So to really accept that my body had to heal and to just sit on the couch, watch some TV, make sure I took the medication when I needed to, and then be able to fully recover before jumping back into life. The biggest challenge was just fully grasping and understanding that I had a chronic disease. I had felt like I was brushed off for so long or wasn't taken seriously, and going to PRM, I felt finally seen and heard, and that My symptoms weren't made up, they weren't outlandish, and I was finally believed and had a reason for everything. So that was really a full circle moment where I had to truly accept that there was something wrong with me and I was not crazy, because a lot of the time I felt crazy just to be told pain is part of being a woman, pain is part of your periods, and to be told, but the pain you're experiencing and what is happening in your body is not normal. Another challenge that I had to personally face post-surgery was knowing that I no longer had my left fallopian tube. I found out post-surgery that due to the endometriosis, my left fallopian tube was actually completely blocked, which would have caused the risk of ectopic pregnancies significantly higher than in a body that had two normally functioning fallopian tubes. So just understanding what that meant with my fertility and life going forward. And the great news is it really does not significantly change my fertility. It actually, if anything, will help in the future, because I do not have I don't know the right word, but I'm going to say toxic body part. There's not a body part that is going to hinder conception, where when it was in my body, it actually would have hindered it. So understanding that from a challenge standpoint and really wrapping my head around all of the things that I found out post-surgery was the biggest challenge, but it was also a really big blessing. Everyone at PRM, both pre and post-surgery, have been incredibly supportive in this entire process. We had scheduled prior to the surgery a 2-week follow-up with Dr. Touchon, my surgeon, so right off the bat I knew I was going to have a follow-up. I was also told what to expect post-surgery, so even though my periods should be better in the future because the lesions were no longer in my body, I was told that they would still be painful initially. And I loved the way that Dr. Touchon actually explained it. Your periods are going to be painful, however, it's going to be a different type of pain. At least that's what my other patients say. And I think it's so funny because obviously as a man, he has never experienced this, but that description was exactly spot on. I did have pain, but it was completely different than the pain I was experiencing pre-surgery. It was manageable, and each cycle post-surgery has gotten better. I also have been able to not skip work during my period. I did have one cycle that I had a slight flare-up, but I've been doing the PRM Protocol post-surgery, and that can sometimes cause flares depending on which nerve was more affected by the lesions. So one of them, I did have a day where I just needed to start work a little later to get some extra rest. However, not debilitating pain where I could not function for the day, not having to skip anything. I've been able to slowly be able to go back to working out. It's been a little rough because it's been over 4 months of actually doing real workouts. So I'm slowly incorporating more weightlifting, going back to doing yoga. Unfortunately, it's the winter, so walks have not been fully incorporated. However, from a mobility and pain standpoint, I'm really able to live a normal life and be able to do what I want when I want within the limitations of my body, not the limitations of the pain that I'm in. And some things that I am able to do now that I couldn't do before treatment, like I said, just living a normal pain-free life. I did not know that this was a possibility. It is like night and day, pre-surgery to post-surgery, and I'm just so thankful for being able to find PRM, be there and feel heard and seen, and actually have a game plan and a treatment that genuinely helped my body. Outside of the surgery itself, the most valuable part of this treatment has been the staff and everyone I've interacted with at PRM. From my first appointment, it was just very nice to feel validated and heard and understood. And even if I didn't have the diagnosis of endometriosis and I didn't go through the surgery, I felt like there was going to be a game plan and they were going to work with me to figure out what exactly was causing this pain. I never felt dismissed like I had at previous doctors, and just truly cared for by the staff. Every time I come in, it's always warm welcome, smiles. Today was my 5th treatment of the PRM protocol, and we were talking about how it's going to be really sad that next Friday is my last one and I won't be coming in until my next follow-up. So really feeling like I'm part of the community there. And advice that I would give someone starting this journey is continue to advocate for yourself. your body more than anyone. So even if the symptoms you're being told are normal and you need to deal with them, keep pushing and trying to find information. That was really my saving grace, was the fact that I didn't give up. I could have given up and not gone to PRM. And if you've only had your first appointment with PRM, I hope you feel and experienced what I felt the first time I was there, because just from walking in, I felt like I knew I found the right place. And I am so amazed by what they do and so grateful that the internet pointed me to them, because no one had referred me, and I just did a bunch of Google searches, took the endometriosis quiz, and decided to set up that appointment.